and you're here because you want to do this better. And I just wanted to share a personal story of how this is actually one of my favorite CalPro modules. It wasn't my first, but it was really important for me. I don't know about you, but as a teacher, I had a lot of classes in teacher training that were interesting and somewhat helpful, but I have to tell you, back in the day, and this was a long time ago, but it shouldn't have been the case, I had not one course on how to write an effective lesson plan. And it wasn't until several years into my teaching that this started, that I got some training. And I find that this CalPro training is super powerful. It's like gold. And you're probably here because you have felt some of those same feelings. It's like, I'm a teacher, and yet I want to really do this in a way that helps my students learn. I want to be organized, I want to be intentional, and I want to be engaging so that the learning is so much more powerful for my students. And so I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I get to facilitate this course. And with that said, I will ask us to move ahead. So let's talk about our objectives. And I want to say thank you, Vicki, for taking over the task of moving the slides for me. We're really here, folks, first of all, to develop a community of online learners. And this might be different than what you're used to. A lot of us are very familiar with face-to-face classroom settings, but there's some really great benefits to being in an online community. One is that if we're introverted, it's really helpful to have more time to think through answers and to consider the content and the process. And again, to have more time and be able to be more thoughtful in responding. Also, we can do it on our own time, okay? So another objective for this webinar is really understand how this course works, okay? So there are some specific things we're going to do. Basically, we'll tell you some of the expectations, but also the week by week activities that we're going to do as we go and what we're going to try and end up with. So it's also really helpful for me as a participant in any kind of webinar or training that I get some practical tips. So we're going to work together as a team to provide those for each other. So let's talk about the overview of our course content and the expectations. First, though, I want to ask you, as we come together, a group of strangers, we have a lot in common. We're all teaching, but are our students learning, right? I mean, that's what our goal is. So there's some bullet points on that screen there. I want you to just read along with me. I'd love for you to share something your students learned in your class this week. And I'd love for you to tell us all how you know that they learned it. So 2 things. What did you have your students learn this week? And how did you know they learned it? And I'm gonna be a little bit quiet as you let you think and as you post your comments in the chat pod. So again, as Vicki said, make sure you have that open. Just type into it and make sure you hit return or enter after you type so it gets posted for us all to see. I know we have representatives from ESL world, from academic world here. So this should be interesting to see all the different things. Jimmy started us off and he said he's been having his students learn how to balance a checkbook. So that's really cool, very critical adult skill. So Jimmy, how do you know that your students learned it? What kind of activities, what kind of assessments, data collection, whatever, allowed you to know that your students learned it? Maybe they're still in process, but how do you know that they're learning some of the sub skills for that? While you're doing that, I'm going to put up the PowerPoint, Vicki, if I can, so that that I can move the slides and you don't have to do that. So keep sharing, guys. Oh, Susanna, I see you're on another iPhone. So thanks for clarifying that up. So please share us. How do you know that your students were learning how to balance a checkbook? All right, guys, give me a second to load the PowerPoint here, and we'll all be back together again. All right, so let me get my chat back up and we'll be good to go.
Thanks, Dave.
For sure. Okay. Let me just get my chat going. Okay, cool. So, all right, let's see where we are. So I'm going to come back to the balancing of the checkbook, even though I love that, and I would love to hear how you know how your students are learning it. We'll come back to that. So I see Eddie saying the students were learning essay structure. Okay, so they're doing their writing, and they demonstrated what they learned by exercises which worked on structure and laying out key points and how to support them clearly. So showing their essay structure was demonstrating it with different exercises. And basically doing the writing. The proof is in the pudding, right? So I'm just curious, Eddie, were you able to provide a rubric or some kind of checklist for students to know for themselves that they were learning it? Or is it mostly through your input as the expert in the area? Okay, I think we lost EDD Tijuana.Starks. So okay, great. So Eddie said, good point. Feedback comes in both forms, checklists and finally migrating and feedback. That's great. Excellent. And while we're waiting for any other comments, I will say this. We'll talk more about week one and what's involved, the activities and such. But when I looked this morning, it was early and people hadn't had a chance to introduce themselves. So I apologize if I'm seeing names in the chat pod that I'm not pronouncing correctly or that are not your full name or that you normally use. So tonight, excuse me, when I go back and read your introductions and see how you you identify the name you like to use, I'll be better next time, I promise. All right, so we're a small group and we've had some input here on how we know our students learn. So why are we doing this? We're trying to get to know each other, and we're trying to see what kind of content matter we're working with. But I'd also like to, let me move my screen here. Make this point that when we're talking about effective lesson planning, the goal of effective lesson planning is student learning and achievement. So we want to create lessons that are engaging and that are efficient, make good use of time, that are powerful and the best practices students use. And that's all so that we know students are learning and that they know they're learning and they're achieving, because that's what keeps them coming back. And that's what keeps our system going well and effectively. So that's what we're looking at. Our goal is student learning achievement. And so we're going to be doing some work to make that happen, right, as the teacher. So let's talk about the course that is going to help us in this process. For our effective lesson planning course, our goal here, our purpose is to guide y'all in planning effective lessons. We got that. And we want to look more closely at how to create a smooth instructional flow. I like to think of some classes as sine wave that goes up and down, where there's a fluid motion between energetic group activities or partnered small group activities and quieter individual or presentational activities. But we're also going to look at a sequence of steps in a lesson that moves from a lot of teacher responsibility to more of student agency and student responsibility, and it's really powerful so they know they're achieving. So specifically in our course for the next 4 weeks, here are our objectives. We want to identify the steps of the lesson plan cycle. And we're going to emphasize this thing called backwards design. So there are specific steps. Some of you may be familiar with a 7-step lesson plan. We're going to be looking at a specific cycle, a specific sequence, and we really want to start with the end in mind, and we'll look at what that means. Also, we really want to make sure you're aware of this excellent resource. OTAN is one of our California state contracted resources that really emphasizes technology to help us and help our students. And they have an online lesson plan builder, so you don't have to keep creating your own lesson plan. You've got a really great resource to get you moving forward. So that's really important. And finally, we really want to keep the students, our learners, at the center of our lesson plans. And so we're going to look at how we can do that. So let's talk about the 4 weeks of course content. The first week is really just saying, well, what are the advantages and challenges of lesson planning? Let's take a big 3,000-foot look at this broad perspective at this idea of writing lesson plans, because it requires us to do some work. It takes time. It takes pre-class effort. So what are the advantages and what are the challenges, and are there solutions to some of those challenges? If we don't buy into the advantages, we really won't be willing to overcome the challenges. So let's look at those advantages and challenges in week 1. Also in week 1, like I mentioned, we're going to be looking at the OTAN Lesson Plan Builder website. And if any of you have had a chance to look at this, it's really powerful. I want to ask you, as Vicki has put on the screen, a yes or no survey. Basically, if you can just answer the poll. Have you had a chance to visit this OTAN Lesson Plan Builder yet? I'm just curious so I can know as a facilitator how we want to put time into this. See how many people we have on board now. I think we had someone leave and come back. Okay.
I think Dave, Etwana may be the only one able to vote right now. I think Susanna
Okay.
May not be able to from the phone.
Okay. So I will just acknowledge that this may be new for most of us, and that's fine. Our goal here is to share some great resources, and this is one of them. So this is going to be new, and I'm excited to get your feedback on how it works for you. I'm going to move the poll to the side. Oops. And I'll leave it up there a little bit longer, but just real quickly, what you see on the screen is example of the home page, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and kill the results, okay?
Yes, just close it out on your end.
So basically you will need to register and you will log in and create a password. And basically the desire here is to really give a real teacher-friendly template for you to develop your lessons. There are some samples that really is going to focus and align with what we're doing, that backwards design we'll talk about. And you'll have great links to the CASAS and SCANS competencies. And it allows us to store the lessons for future use. And so it's a really great database. So I'm excited about this, and we'll make that a part of our course as well. So I just basically share these items. Again, you have a template for the lesson plan. You don't have to rebuild it every time. You'll see other lesson plans that you might want to steal and tweak for your own use. And I'm seeing some comments here. Is this something I can use outside of this course? Yes. So we're going to show it to you in the course, and you'll basically be able to access it anytime with once you're registered, just by logging into it. And again, this is through the lesson plan builder, you can actually work with others on a lesson plan, which is kind of cool. And again, as I said, there are really great resources from CASAS and SCANS and other lessons themselves. So this has been one of the most popular items in the past with some of our participants. So I'm curious to see what you guys think. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to check the chat pod and share any thoughts you have. Okay, so week 1 is also really laying out for you what we see in the lesson plan builder, and that is that sequence or that series of steps in a really powerful gradual release approach to lesson planning, where we're gradually releasing some of the expertise from teacher or student leaders to the rest of the class. And so there's an acronym we use, WIPIA, the WIPIA model. So some of you may have heard of this. I'm going to go through it real quickly and talk through it, and then we're going to work through it and construct our learning using it in the course. So here's what that stands for. The W stands for a warm-up or a review. Basically, we know from neuroscience that we can only learn by building on something we already know. So we say, what's our prior knowledge? And let's review it. And then we can move on to introduce something new. So whereas a warm-up is pretty brief, maybe 5 to maximum maybe 15 minutes, we're going to have an introduction which basically tells what we're going to do today and why it's important. We know from adult learning principle that this is critical. A real strong introduction can make the difference between your students really understanding what they've learned and coming back the next day and being really strong in finding relevance in the class, or saying, this is not for me. It only has to be 30 minutes, 30 seconds long, but it's what we're doing today and why is it important to your goals and what you want to get out of the course. So warm up, introduction, WI. The first P is for presentation. This is usually a teacher, but it can also be a video, it could be another student, it could be presenting an article. It's basically what is the new material that we're wanting students to either understand or a skill that they're trying to build. So that's presentation. The next P stands for practice. Again, we're moving beyond the teacher to student engagement. And so we need to give them something to work on and get that repetition. We know that learning comes from repetition and from emotion. So we want to be doing some practice that is not only just kills and drills, but engages the full person socially and emotionally. So presentation and practice moves to evaluation. So how are we doing? Where are we with our learning? That can take a number of different ways. It can be, finger signs, yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. It can be multiple choice. Hopefully it's a task that is more real world. That's something a student will actually do in their lives outside the class. So it's very relevant for them. And even more so, we get to the point of application. This is where we're trying to take the skill or the knowledge and use it outside the classroom or inside the classroom in ways that replicate what students want to be able to do outside the class. So WIPPEA is WIPPEA. Are there any questions before we go on? I mean, even if you just remember this and use 1 or 2 steps of this in your teaching, you would radically shift your teaching because it's built on neuroscience. It's the now, what we know now, what's new, and what's next. Those 3 phases is how we learn, and these break it down a little bit more. So I'm excited to present this to you guys and have you work with it and share back in your lessons how we do this. So moving on from week 1 to week 2, the course content will be studying the skill of writing meaningful and measurable learning objectives. It's the foundation for the lesson plan. So again, what do we want students to be able to do? And so we want it to be meaningful. It's got to be a task that's real world and relevant to their goals, but it also has to be measurable so that students can monitor their growth forward and their progression. So week 2 starts with objectives. How do we write them really well? Included in that then is this planning wheel or a process of the lesson planning that takes that WIPPEA model and puts it into a circles that's ever ongoing. You can see right in the middle of that is the objective. It's measurable. Students will be able to. We're going to talk about how we always start with students. It's not what I'm doing as a teacher, it's what students are doing. And how can we measure it? And then you can see warm up and review, like we said, and we're going to evaluate how that goes, leading into the introduction. So what's new today? And presenting new information with a little comprehension check, again, evaluation throughout. We're going to practice with the students. Maybe it's a we do where we're doing part of it and they are also doing part of it, or a we do where we're working with them and then pass it to y'all do. You're going to work in a small group, so there's lots of support and guidance, and then evaluation comes so that students know if they've really reached the objective. That's where that backwards design piece comes in. We were aiming for this. Did we meet it? And finally, let's apply it. So let's take a moment to think about, I'm reading the chat pod. So I see that Atwana says, is this something I can use? Oh, sorry. Are we, Susanna says, are we going to have access to this webinar if we need to review any of this information? I'm going to say no, because what we're going to do is give you all this information in bite-sized pieces throughout the course. So this will be in Moodle in the course, presented in some exact ways and some exactly the same ways and some a little bit different. But you will have all this information just in a different format. Good question.
And one thing, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Just a reminder, Atwana, that the recording for this webinar, if you do want to review it, will be posted in Makeup Assignment. Even though you don't need to complete the Makeup Assignment, you're always welcome to click on the link and review the webinar if need be.
That's a great comment. Thank you, Vicki. All right. So what we're going to talk about now is digging a little bit deeper into this idea of lesson objectives. We know that it's really critical for us to post our lesson objective for students to see. We know it helps create a filter in the mind of students so they know what their target is. And so there's a thing that happens almost unconsciously where they start looking for patterns. They start looking for information that will feed that objective. And also it's really helpful for people with learning disabilities. Structure can be really helpful. So this is a chance for us to open up the chat pod to you again and get your feedback. If you do post your lesson objective in the class, what's your experience of its effect on student learning? I've named a couple, but what have you seen? So thank you, Eddie, for clarifying. We have some similar names in the group already. So let me know, guys. Let us all know. What are you finding happens when you post your lesson objectives? If you don't, that's fine. We're going to learn together about how it can be beneficial and how it can be done in a user-friendly way, both for us as teachers and students. Are you posting your lesson objective, and how does that work? Don't be shy, guys. And you're welcome to type, I'm not currently posting my lesson objective. I may be thinking about it. Yeah, for example, Eddie says, I don't really do this, but would love to learn why it might be important to do so. Okay, so this will be focusing on in week 2. We're going to look at some of the advantages, some of the benefits, and some of the how-to for this. There's a guy named John Hattie who's from New Zealand. He's a researcher, professor, education specialist. He looks at a lot of neuroscience, and he talks about, I'll just say this because I love this fact. He looked at a massive study that took in a lot of smaller studies, and he found that when we post an objective in our room for our class to see, we increase their ability to learn by 18%. And if we refer back to it at least once or twice throughout the class, we improve their learning at least 27%. So is that something that you guys may have seen if you've added this to your practices in your class? And I can share a little bit more of that study if you want me to in the resources part of our Moodle, because I find it fascinating and it really moved me forward in my practice of really creating clear objectives for my students in student-friendly language. And I think that's critical too. It's not something we do for administrators. It's not something we do for visitors. We do it for our students. And for me, I do it for myself to keep me on task. But really, really powerful practice. Okay, so I think we should go ahead and move on. All right, so from week 2, we go to week 3. We've looked at the big picture of lesson planning, the benefits, the challenges. We've talked about a model, the WIPPEA model, and then week 2, we start that WIPPEA model with a really strong objective. And then course content week 3 is this idea of backwards design, where we move from our objective back in our mind to what would need to come before that and what would need to come before that. So we're just curious, are you familiar with this idea of backwards design? A simple yes or no. This will help me know how to move forward with us as a group. And it is sometimes called other names, but we're going to use this expression backwards design.
And just to interject, if there's anybody on who for some reason is unable to answer directly in the poll, you can always put your answer in the chat as well.
Thank you. That's a great reminder. Yeah, if you're on the phone and you're not using the app, for sure, go ahead and type in the chat pod. Say, yes, I do, or yes, I am familiar, or no, I'm not. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this up. I'm gonna move it, for myself at least, so I can share with you a little bit more about it. Okay, I'm gonna move it on. So let's just look at the screen here. You can see there's 3 boxes with arrows moving from 1, 2 to 3. So number 1 is identifying the desired results. That's what we will just have talked about in week 2, that desired results are objective. Again, what do we want students to know or be able to do? The objective of the class, student knowledge or skills. So if that's our goal, to have them achieve that, what's number 2? Well, we need to have evidence showing that they actually got there. And that's something we talked about in that community build earlier on. I want my students to learn X, so I will find out by looking at Y, some kind of data, some kind of behavior. Yeah, it could be a test, a quiz, thumbs up, thumbs down, or actual task. And that's something we really want to aim for. So it could be a rubric. So we've got our objective or our desired results. We've got some evidence that shows us if they've got those results. So what comes before that? Well, we need to give them some learning experiences and some instruction so that they can engage in these new skills. So we're really, as you can tell, we're saying, okay, if they want to do this, how will they know that they got there? And what will they do to practice so that they can get there? I didn't say that very well, but I think you guys get it. So I love this. It just is really powerful. It was a really simple way to do it, but we don't normally think that way because it seems a little backwards. So let's move on. Many of you are familiar with Stephen R. Covey's work and talking about highly effective people. And there's a quote here that applies to what we're talking about with this backwards design for learning. I'll go ahead and read it. To begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. It means to know where you're going so that you better understand where you are now so that the steps you take are always in the right direction. Another way of thinking about backwards design, it helps us know where we are now as well so that we take the right steps to get to our destination. So again, backwards design has these basic questions. What should students know and be able to do? That's our objective. And how will students demonstrate that? An evaluation. The last thing is them achieving the objective. Just before that, we evaluate. And if you're in a professional learning community, these questions should look very similar because these are the first two questions of a professional learning community. And that's why I'm really excited about this module too, is because it's very coherent for the work we're doing as systems at our schools. So it's not only good for what we're doing with our students in our classes, but it's good for how we work with our collaborators, our other teachers in learning together to improve our system-wide instruction. So another idea in week 3 is that we're going to look at how to connect the evaluation activity with the learning objectives as we study those 6 stages of the WPM model for lesson planning. So it's really good and really important that things are connected. So it's not just here's one step, oh, here's another step. We want to make sure that the evaluation really shows exactly what that students are learning those. So it's a really valid and reliable activity, and it's worthwhile to students. If we're having them do conversations so that they can have more effective interactions at work, for example, and then we give them a multiple choice test, not so great, right? So we're going to talk about how to make sure we are really coherent in the work we're doing. All right, finally, course content week 4. Let's talk about it. Yeah, we're going to create a lesson. Pretty straightforward. This is what we're gearing up for. This is what we're preparing for. So this is what we should do. Just like we talked about, our backwards design is for you. Our objective is for you to create an effective lesson plan. So you're going to create one. And to help you know if you're doing it well, you're going to reflect on a teacher-centered versus a learner-centered type of instruction. Now, this is something that might be new for a lot of us, but again, our goal is to get in the minds of our students. What do they need? What behaviors do they need to be taking? What skills do they need to be demonstrating? What knowledge do they need to have? Not what are we doing, but what are they doing? And is the lesson helping them to do that which they need to do? So, course expectations. We've looked at the 4 weeks, and we're going to talk now about CalPro. I'm just curious, Vicki, do we have a survey for this? Or, yep, we do. Just curious, you guys, have you participated in a CalPro online course before? Please let us know with a yes or no in the survey or the poll there. Or as Vicki said earlier, if you can just type into the chat pod. Or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and just say, I've done this, or I haven't. It's really fine. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you like. It's one of the nice things about Zoom. Okay, so we're 50-50 on this. It's all good. So if you've taken the course before, feel free if you want to share more in the chat pod. We'll do a little bit of that in just a second. If you haven't, no worries. That's what this webinar is about, to give you an understanding of what the expectations are. So let's talk about that. First of all, we're going to encourage you to read the course materials. You're here for a reason. You want to gain some skills and knowledge, and we've really curated some great examples, some resources for you. Please read them because you're going to be using them. You're going to be using them to complete the exercises and assignments. We have each week a series of really focused, targeted exercises and assignments that are the activities that are going to help you achieve the objective that we're working on. So what'll that look like? Well, you're going to read and contribute to asynchronous online discussions at least twice a week. So that means everything except for today, right now, and our second webinar is on your own time. So if you're a night owl, if you like to sit in your PJs after the workday's over when it's quiet, kids are to bed, or maybe you're an early morning person before the house gets noisy or before your brain gets filled with other work items, you can be doing work there. If you like to do it during lunch hour, you can do it there. But at least twice a week, there will be some online discussions because, as you know, when we collaborate with other teachers, really powerful, and we learn so much more than just on our own. So that's a critical piece. Once we read those materials and complete the exercises, we're going to contribute to discussions online. Some of the policies related to our course is that we're going to make this weekly participation required. And when we say required, it means we want you all to achieve your goal of getting really effective lesson planning under your belt, or at least better than when you started. So that's really critical. Also, we will be giving you a certificate, and that will come to you when all the items are completed. Okay. Assignments should be completed within 2 weeks. There's this thing that happens where when we're all working together, we're learning together more strongly because we're kind of in the same place and we're thinking, our brains and our actions are kind of in the same place, and it's stronger. It's more synchronized. So I will be grading how you design an evaluation activity, how you write an objective, how you do a comprehension check activity. We'll be grading teacher-centered versus learner-centered instruction reflection, and of course your lesson plan. But that'll all be very clear in the Moodle. There's lots of great text features with bold letters and indentations, and you've probably seen part of it already as you've opened up the Moodle. But just want you to stay on course, and if there's ever an issue, if you're having some emergency that comes up, I am always very flexible, and I'm always open to hearing what's going on with you and being able to support you. My goal is to have you meet your objective, to refine your craft, to be a better teacher with better lesson plans, because your students will love you for being a well-planned teacher. So that's the policies. Again, let's think about, with these course expectations and policies, there's work to be done, right? So I'd love for you to, if you're able, to think of a tip. And what that means is past participants reflect that interaction with colleagues is really the greatest benefit of the course. So how about this? What tip can you offer? Consider the scenario. The week's material is available on Mondays. If you do the initial work at the beginning of the week, you have the rest of the week to interact with your online colleagues. Okay, pretty straightforward. So if it's available on Monday, early on in the week is really great, so that at the end of the week you can see what people have done and start interacting over it. So what I'd ask you now is to share a tip that you use to manage your time to do online coursework or to do any kind of work. We're busy people as teachers, as possibly family members. We have volunteer obligations. How do you manage your time? And specifically, if you've taken a CalPro course before, how have you enabled yourself to get the work done and feel good about it in a timely manner? Again, whether it's through CalPro or something that you do to help yourself stay the course and stay on time with your tasks. Any tips to share, guys? And you can unmute yourself and talk too, if you want. Should I put my screen back on? Maybe I'll make myself. Okay, so I'm already online here. Any tips? What do you guys do to stay on track? All right. Thanks, Eddie. I always piece things out. I work a bit every day instead of trying to do it all in one day, like going to the gym. Nice. Yeah, you can't try and look like a bodybuilder by doing it all in one day, or you can't get your heart rate or cardiovascular strong all in one day. So you're really modeling, Eddie, I think what we're talking about in this course is that we have to have an objective to try and meet a goal, and then we have to backwards plan. How can I get there? And it has to be over time. So that's really great. So I encourage you guys to take out your calendars, whether they're paper or digital, and look at the different activities in each of the weeks. They're not all about the same. Some might require a little bit more time. Usually we say it's anywhere between 5 to 10 hours a week, usually fewer. This is a little bit simpler, less demanding course than many of the CalPro courses. But yeah, take a look through Moodle. I know that not all of the weeks are in view. I'm just remembering that now. But if you can aim for Mondays and piece out the work, as Eddie says. So if there's 3 different things to do, if you can, aim for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, one day each, that gives you Thursday and Friday, to respond to other people and have a free weekend. Or you may decide to respond to other people on the weekend. Some of us like to work on the weekends, I know. It's better free time. Any other comments? Any work-life management tips? I could use them, let me tell you right now. Right, Vicki? All right, so let's begin to round out here with where we're going. Here's another great quote from Yogi Berra. You may know him as one of our icons in baseball. Has to do with effective lesson planning, but that backwards design and really knowing what your target is. Is there anybody who wants to turn off their mic who can read, or turn on their mic and read it? Okay. So you can read it for yourselves, but I'll read it out loud. If you don't know where you are going, you're liable to end up someplace else. So this is about our focus, and this is about really saying, what are students doing? What are the specific skills and specific knowledge that they need to have? Because clarity is critical. We know from the research that clarity of purpose for students and teachers is is where we're going. And if we don't know that, get from the up and up, we're gonna be lost. So thank you, Yogi Berra. All right. So how did we do today for our webinar objectives? Well, we had a few strong and mighty webinar participants. Really glad you were here, guys. We're starting to build our online community, and I would encourage you to continue with that process as you introduce yourselves in the discussion thread of who you are. Just follow the prompts. Tell us a little bit about who you are. And another way to do that in the course is through responding to your colleagues. If something doesn't make sense, just in the discussion thread say, please tell me more, or I wonder about this. And kudos are always great. We always love hearing like, oh, that's a really great idea, or have you considered this? So let's keep the community of online learners going as we move forward into our course. And I hope you really understand how the course works, how we have 4 weeks, we have another webinar in week 3, and each week really has a theme with activities to help us reach our goal of ultimately writing really effective lesson plans. Good, I'm glad, Tawana, that you're looking forward to this class. I am too. Like I say, this is one of my favorite CalPro modules. So simple, so powerful, and so foundational for our work, right? So you're very welcome. Let's see where we're at here. One more thing I want to ask you before you go is if you would use the chat pod, I would ask you to tell Vicki and me what was most helpful in this webinar so that we can either improve it or so that we can build upon it as I go forward with facilitating. Or if there's things that you want to learn more about that really excited you from the little teaser that we presented today. What was helpful? I think you're pretty much it, Eddie. Tawana, yeah, you can type in the chat pod too. I'll just chat a little while you type. What worked for you today? What are you excited about? Cool. Tawana says she's excited about learning about the objectives and the goals. Yeah, we all need help with that. It's a task that we get better at over time. Clarity is not necessarily something we're good at, especially when it comes to other people's behavior, right? Sometimes we don't even have clarity on our own behavior. So to really be clear about that and to be focused and have good goals that tie in with our students' goals, yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so Ed says, everything was clear. It doesn't seem too daunting given my schedule, LOL. Cool, that's a good thing to know. We really want this to be something you can cross the finish line on and walk away with really great lessons. Okay, no worries. We're gonna wrap up now, guys. So no need to worry about if your internet is not super great right now. Just wanna let you know some dates. So some of the next steps, we want to make sure that week 1, you complete the activities by March 8th, and week 2, you begin the activities by March 9th. So I believe that the dates and deadlines are pretty clear in Moodle. So today is what is today, the 3rd? You know, like you said, Eddie and others, really look at the week's events right away. Don't wait until like Thursday to open up Moodle because that could be a little shocking and not so fun. And you won't meet your objectives. So open up Moodle, you know, check it at the beginning of the week and at least 2 other times, probably throughout the week, and you'll be in a really good place. So as we wind down here, I'm going to call attention to Vicki's link in the chat pod. I'm going to finish speaking really soon. And what this is an evaluation. We want to hear what you thought. and make sure that we're on track with what we're doing. Vicki, did you have any other words about that?
No, thank you, Dave. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And as Dave mentioned, if you could be so kind as to just click on that link in the chat pod and complete the survey for this webinar, we'd certainly appreciate it, so we can prepare even better for the next time. And just a reminder for everybody that the recording link for this webinar will be posted in Moodle no later than tomorrow morning. So I know we're off to a great start for this particular course. And again, thank you very much, Dave, for all your help and facilitation and guidance. And we will see you online. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you, Vicki. And we'll see you, guys, real soon on Moodle. If I haven't seen your introduction, I look forward to getting to know a little bit more about you. And I'm excited. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you again on Moodle. Bye-bye.
Bye.